One of the differences between the quakes and what's happening now is, of course, that after the quakes, we were able to gather together physically. We might have lost our places in which we could do business, but we soon found new ones. So the likes of the Addington Coffee Co-op, for example, down the road became a hub. And we didn't have the luxury of things like Zoom. We had Skype, which was pretty feeble, to be fair. But we were able to gather together physically, even though that the places that we knew had gone or weren't safe to be in. That happened remarkably swiftly. And so if I take you back to the September Quake, which was the first one, the one in the middle of the night where people woke up and buildings fell down but nobody died. Politically, what was happening at that stage was that we were about to go into the elections in the October, the local government elections. And you might recall that Jim Anderton and Bob Parker had been going at it hammer and tongs. Jim was well and truly ahead of Bob in the polls. Bob was going to lose, no two ways about it. And he'd sat down with Barry Corbett and me probably 2 weeks before and said, what are my chances? And we both just shook our heads and said, you got none, nothing, soz, can't do it. There was a seismic shift and Bob went back in on a landslide, sorry, no pun intended, and then proceeded to have a thoroughly rotten time for the next 3 years, because what happened in Christchurch, and what I think we're going to start to see around the country, is there were phases that we went through. In the response phase, what happens first of all is heroism, and people struggle to find ways to understand what's happened, but what they want to do is help. And they often put themselves ahead of others because that's the natural thing you do, and you work yourself into the ground. One of the things that's important for leaders to remember, and I know it's such a cliche, but this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. This is a very, 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 very long ultra marathon that we are in now, because change is exhausting. And currently we're living through constant change. Day in, day out, we don't have any sense really of when this lockdown is going to end. We know that we've got a destination it will be evaluated on, but we don't know for certain that it's going to happen on that date. And at the moment, we don't know what it's going to look like at the end of it. So we have uncertainty. And those are things that when you live through them day after day, they are really tiring. You may not even be aware of it, but sitting in the back of your head is that little lizard brain that humans have, and it's going, this is really stressful. I don't know what's going on, and I actually don't like this, and I'd really like to just run away, but I can't. That fight or flight response is what we all experienced through the quakes. And it was much easier to perceive then because you get these big jolts and you'd have adrenaline and you could actually see the spike and it would go down. We'd all experience it at the same time. We could also get away from it. All we had to do to get away from the quakes was get in the car and drive. And we called them quake breaks, where you would get on an Air New Zealand flight for $59. You could go anywhere in the country, you could get away from it. Even if it was for 2 or 3 days or a week, you could get away. People chose to leave. They took their kids and they migrated. You saw the exodus out of Christchurch. We can't do that now. We're stuck. And so for the whole world, what we're experiencing at the moment universally is a big sea change in what we've known before. For Christchurch, people outside of it kept talking about the new normal and kept talking about resilience. I've still got my bands of hope. These were a fundraiser that was sold internationally for about $5 or something. Because in the beginning, of course, the whole world went, oh, Christchurch, it was so pretty, it was so lovely, here, have money. Not happening now, because it's everywhere. We're all in the same awful space together, and this is like nothing any of us have seen before. What are the lessons out of Christchurch for that? Put yourself first. Put your family and friends second. Put your work a distant third. You have to look after yourself in a way that you've never done it before. You have to monitor your sleep. Are you getting enough sleep? Have there been changes to your eating pattern? What is your alcohol use like? Are you using sugar or caffeine in ways that you haven't before, or prescription drugs? All of that stuff, you have to do some really, really hard self-reflection. If you don't already have someone that you can talk to professionally, if you're a leader in business or a leader in another setting, you need to be thinking about professional supervision for yourself to make sure that you aren't getting overwhelmed and not seeing it, because that's something that can happen so easily. And then you have to look at your family. And Michael, I'm looking at you on the screen. I can see you down there. You need to be looking at Denise, and you need to be holding her to account and going, Denise, why have you just cooked food for the entire street again? That's heroism. And heroism at the moment is an overachiever. I'm not criticizing Denise, but heroism is a sign of somebody who isn't running a marathon. We need to pull back into marathon mode, because this is not going to be over in a few weeks or a few months. This is years and years and years. This is our lives changing around us. It's not necessarily entirely bad. It's change though, and change is painful. I'm fond of saying that the quakes didn't just knock the facades off buildings, they knocked them off people as well. And you really did find out what was underneath a human being in those times, whether they were strong or brave or self-interested or venal, whatever, you found it all out. I think we'll see the same here. I'm also seeing people starting to move into the second phase. After the heroism and the love in Christchurch, which lasted much longer, I think, because we had space from each other, it moved into a phase of mourning and of grief and of anger. And I'm starting to see that. I suspect a lot of that is because people are living on top of each other and they can't get away. And they're having to work there as well. You know, one of my staff is a parent working at home with 2 children under 2. And her husband is also working from home, and they're sharing Zoom. And so for her, I've said to her at the moment, I want spectacular underachievement out of you. If you attempt to put in 40 hours a week, we're going to be having a stern talk. I want you to do as little as humanly possible to keep your role ticking over. And that to me is good. Because out of this, you need to understand, the more you try and do that is beyond the minimum, the more you build in the risk of human error. You know, the normal processing part of your brain that problem solves and can happily multitask, that's busy. That's gone. It ain't there anymore. All you've got at the moment is a tiny little top bit that's sitting there, and there's a big open door for our friend Hugh. We all know Hugh, right? Denise, you know Hugh? Human error. When all you've got is the little top bit, human error hops in and gives you a hand. And at the moment, you'll see people around you as well making mistakes. You'll see fatigue, strange choices, people doing dumb stuff on the road, people forgetting about your bubble when they're running, and you'll find your temper might spike. You might find that there's volatility in the way you react and your tolerance goes down. Those are things that are quite normal and healthy. You've just got to acknowledge them and expect them. So the quakes in Christchurch, for some of us, are as fresh as they were the day that they happened, because we're still tied to them. I still have a house there. I'm still in litigation with EQC. That's been my new normal. And I haven't been able to get away from it. So in a way, it's given me a good preparation for this, because I think that's what's going to happen for all of us here, whether it's you and your work or your children and their work or whatever. Things are going to change, and there'll be winners and losers out of all of this, as there are in everything. I do think that we will see, we have an opportunity now that I hope we don't lose. And that really is an opportunity to think about how we work, about decluttering our work. If you can strip away all of the unnecessary tasks, and that's okay in a time of crisis, well, why can't you do it normally? Why do we have to have a 40-hour week? Why can't we work from home if we want to? Why can't we then be less dependent on our cars? Why can't we live more in our neighbourhoods and walk around them with our dog? Why can't we spend time with our dog during the day instead of having to put her in daycare? You know, these are things that actually give us opportunity. And why can't we be kinder to each other, which we're all being exhorted to do at the moment and thinking about that? Why can't we make that our new normal? I think for me, that really is what Rotary is all about.